So family, we are now live on YouTube. Uh, so I have the honor today of introducing our distinguished guest speaker. One second, I hear that I thought I heard a whistle in the background, like a referee was telling me that I was speaking too slow. So I have the honor of introducing our distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Jared Ball. All around, just amazing guy. He has one of the most he's curated one of the most comprehensive libraries of liberatory content and imixwhatilike.org. Generally speaking, Dr. Ball is a father and a husband. After that, he is a professor of communication studies at Morgan State University. He is the founder and curator of imixwhatilike.org, which is a multimedia hub of emancipatory journalism and revolutionary beat reporting. Dr. Ball is also the author of The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power, which will be the subject that he will be building with us on today. So, Dr. Ball, with that being said, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And if I didn't do you justice in my introduction, feel, please feel free just to add on.
No, first of all, you did more than I deserve or need, and I want to just say, first of all, thank you to everybody, and please forgive me. It was entirely my fault for the confusion with the scheduling, and when they started up my daughter's soccer schedule, I think I got confused. So the whistle you heard is I am at a game. I've moved myself as far away as possible, so I do apologize if any of that seeps in, and I also apologize for being all hot and sweaty, but it is 100 degrees out here and they got like back-to-back games. So again, I apologize to everybody for that. The only thing that I would want to add, given this audience and this community, is that I did attempt and have supported and attempted to support as a member and just as a supporter Malcolm X grassroots movement in DC and other chapters for a long time. So I'm very appreciative of this collective and the work I know you all are involved in. So it's a pleasure to be here. And I don't know if there's a specific question you want me to start with, or if I should just, if you wanted me to just talk a little bit about the book, or
Yeah, so the way we typically structure when we have our guest presenters, and we can absolutely kind of push through and adjust today. But typically, what we like to do is give you about 20 to even 30 minutes to just introduce yourself and your work. And then we typically have some questions prepared that we'll like engage you with, and then we'll allow our audience to also, based upon the conversation, tap in and ask questions. So I'll also be
Okay.
taking questions that may pop up on YouTube as well.
Well, I'll start off a little short, and because unfortunately I might get called away in about 40 minutes or so, and then I'm happy to come back, or I'm happy to maybe we'll just hold off and finish up. So again, I apologize for that, but the short of it is, and I know everybody in this organization and many of the people watching have heard over the years a version in the work that we do of the myth. And we've read about it. Many of our favorite luminaries have, at different times of their careers, championed it. Certainly the Black commercial press promotes it. But we've heard varieties or variations, that is, of the myth, as I'm calling it, of buying power, Black buying power, that argues we have at this point more than $1 trillion to spend, and we just are financially illiterate or immature or irresponsible, and instead of buying, using that money to create to create wealth and develop assets and land and stock, etc., we prefer to spend it on weed and rims and hair and fronts, etc., and we just squander the money. It's promoted in music. It's promoted across the entire Black or African political spectrum. The myth is international, and it's actually applied to every segment of society, but it only has a very particular perniciousness when it's directed at us. The myth, in short, is a marketing and advertising product that is meant to it's meant to direct ad revenue, to collect ad revenue, and is meant to and on the other aspect of it is the other end of the myth is it's meant to promote an access or an openness within white supremacy and capitalism and American state apparatus procedure that doesn't exist. So the short of it is we don't have this money. The last total in I think 2019, Black America as a whole only earned about a little over $800 billion. So the idea that we would be spending more than $1 trillion and that this somehow would equate to power is itself on its face mythological and easily dismissed. But it is the propagated wing of the myth. It's the propagation of the myth that causes so much confusion. It's so what started as a way in the 19th century for the business class and and their friends in government to determine how little they could pay workers without workers rebelling, with also allowing workers to be able to afford the products they were helping to produce that would again drive the economy, so that what's happening right now with the COVID crisis wouldn't occur more massively. That is a shutdown of the economy. People don't have enough to spend, and then businesses suffer, and then people start raising questions about the nature and the relationship of the nature of our economy and the relationship various segments of our society and us in particular have to it. So to avoid all of that, they came up with this concept of buying power, which is again meant to assess not how much money Black people actually have or how much wealth Black people actually have or even how much money Black people actually earn, but it's strictly a measurement of how much available money can be spent on goods that are made available to those consumers that are owned and distributed and produced by other people. So it is a measurement of the power of Black people to enrich other people who own the economy and own the businesses, own the wealth, own the, as Marx would say, the means of production. And then to the viciousness of it, the perniciousness of it, is that while we are decreasingly paid, decreasingly made access or decreasingly afforded access to wealth and healthcare and safety from police and military violence, we are being told that we are squandering this opportunity because we don't take advantage of this $1 trillion mythology. And the part that for me, having covered this for more than 10 years, the part in finally writing the book on it that was most disturbing to me was the focus I had not previously paid, but should have been paying, to the role of the Black commercial press in all of this, because it is not only they who are primarily at this point responsible for promoting the myth, but they are starting really in the 1950s with John H. Johnson responsible for helping produce the myth in conjunction and in league with our political and economic enemies. So at this point, it is the Black commercial press, the Black media, that is working with Nielsen and the Selig Center to produce, who are the two primary, really the Selig Center is the only progenitor of the myth, but the Nielsen Group helps buttress it. And it is the National Publishers Association, the largest Black commercial press publishing unit, and other elements within the Black commercial press that have been working with them for years, decades, in fact, to promote this mythology. So by the time any of us come to be critical of it, it is the Black commercial media apparatus that makes it impossible to raise the critique, and really even causes problems among many within our so-called left wing or African-centered wing of our community. And I'll stop with this example that took place live on Twitter to sort of buttress my point, and something I think needs to be discussed, is that while I am trying to point out that, well, I'll describe it this way. I'll say it this way, because these are comrades and colleagues and friends. But some colleagues and comrades and friends, because of their friendship with, allegiance to, relationship with, involvement with commercial Black presses, they have not been able to support this, I think, unassailable critique of the problem, in part because those commercial outlets rely on the myth to attract ad revenue. And specifically, because it comes up for me all the time, people are always asking me, why aren't you on Roland Martin's show? Or why isn't this discussed on Roland Martin's show, given that he has as he says, the only Black daily, news program. But if you scroll down to the bottom of the front page of his website, he is part of the promotional effort. And this is not to attack him. This is just to simply lay out the part of the crisis that we have in raising this critique or having this discussion. At the bottom of his front page of his website, he is touting the mythology of buying power in part so that he can attract ultimately white corporate ad revenue for his commercial platform. Because what it does, the way the myth operates, as he just brought up again the other day in his conversation with T.I., is that if Black people can be promoted as having $1 trillion to spend, white corporations will be willing to spend their portion of what is now about $500 billion a year in ad spending with Black corporate or commercial presses who want to attract that revenue. So as my good dear friend that many of us know, Dr. Greg Carr, more recently, in part, not only because of, I think, a disagreement with me over this, but a disagreement with me over my conclusions in the book that do not support, for instance, voting for Biden. We are able to have a sort of half-hearted online Twitter exchange, but not actually have this discussed in any sort of meaningful platform in any meaningful way within the commercial apparatus media that Carr currently operates in part with Roland Martin, and secondarily, though I have been on once, with Karen Hunter, whose political trajectory, so to speak, and then the simple business interests of those platforms. And this is not to hate, it's just, although I'm happily a hater, it's not to hate, it is to offer up as an objective assessment as possible. This is part of the problem over the years that I and others have had with raising this concern and raising this conversation and trying to enter it into the discussion that takes place within the Black political sphere. Because the primary platforms, or many of the primary platforms that attract a mass Black audience, have this commercial interest that can't allow this conversation to be extended on it. So as I asked, Dr. Carr, on Twitter, as the last time he went on, or the last time he referenced my work on Karen Hunter's show, and I thought rebranded and misrepresented it, in part to make her more comfortable, and I think her space more comfortable with my conclusions. He, as a friend and a comrade for years, and a genius, in fact, a literal, I think, genius, I think could be doing more to open up room for this conversation, where he, in fact, in this instance, plays a role with these Black commercial press gatekeepers, as I'm describing them, on a small scale, to prevent access or an extended conversation that I think needs to obviously take place. So I'll stop there for now, and I'll and invite conversation and critique, response, questions, etc.
No,
and again, thanks for having me.
Well, just so you know that we're happily haters here too, just as well. So hopefully, one day we'll be in the running for a hate award at your annual ceremony.
When we kick them back up again, I'm sure you will.
All right. So no, you actually as you were speaking, you were like going down the line and like crossing out my questions. So I'm trying to figure out a way to strategize to ask the questions in a different way, because ultimately speaking, this myth, and you spoke to kind of like the strategy behind why it persists, because there's a need to veil the conditions that we are up against, because if we better understood our conditions that we were up against and our likelihood of addressing them or changing them based upon this myth of buying power, then we would see that that's something that's probably not doable, and it would make us want to pursue other means that are not desirable by the powers that be, so to speak. So I guess the first thing that I would want to ask is, because by problematizing or exposing the myth of Black buying power, I guess the first question I would ask is, where does that put us as a community in terms of our ability to self-finance our liberation, right? Because ultimately this argument has been used by many within our tradition to say, hey, that we as a community can go off and do our own thing, because as a nation, when you look at our buying power, we would be the 11th largest nation on this planet, so to speak, we as Black people in America, right? So when you look at, okay, well then that's a myth, where does that leave us in terms of our ability to self-finance our liberation?
It's a great question. First of all, it leaves us in a bad spot. And it leaves us in a situation where I've been arguing and would continue to argue that we cannot finance our liberation. That's not the pathway to the freedom that we want. Very quickly, and I do talk about this in the book, GDP, or this claim that we have a buying power that would rank us in the top whatever for GDP, is itself on so many levels mythology. And I include in the book the exchange I had with the president of Industrial Bank here in DC, who promoted the myth and seems not only to not understand buying power, but not understand what gross domestic product is, because GDP does not measure anything other than the wealth that's created for the owners of the economy. So GDP is not a measurement and is never used by honest economists to measure the economic condition of various of any community and then segments within any community. GDP again measures how much wealth is created for the owners of the economy. So as I argue at the end of this book and just in general, the only above board legal so-called overt strategy I think we should be involved in, aside from perhaps general organization and perhaps direct, nonviolent direct action, is the move towards developing public policy that addresses itself towards the GDP of this country. That says, rather than argue for reparations, rather than argue for a redirection of buying power, we should be arguing only for a redistribution of the gross domestic product that we help create every year, which before this crisis was $20 trillion, and almost only goes to the top 1% or the owners of the economy, which is a public policy decision. One of the core myths or component myths to buying power and to Black capitalism in general is the idea that we can get our money right and then we can get our politics right. But that's exactly the opposite of how it works. And the wealthy know that, and that's why they've captured political apparatus and public policy, because that's what determines how wealth is created and who gets it. And the more that they can, which has been an overt part of their strategy since at least the Nixonian era, the more that they can get us to try to focus exclusively on our business and our money, the more they can be assured that we'll never be a threat, because wealth is never created by consumption. It's never created by the establishment of small business or even small banks. It's a public policy decision that's initially born of military conquest, and then supported by a public policy apparatus that redistributes and extracts wealth and then redistributes it upwards. So that's what I think we need to understand, that there is no economic path to freedom. There's only a political one that's born of organization and social movements and et cetera. And then once that is more or less taken care of, then we can go back into our individual communities and take care of the rest of the reparative needs that we would have that can't come from public policy or come from a state like this.
So just to play devil's advocate here. Mm-hmm. So when you problematize one myth, could it be equally problematic to present a second myth, and that the solution or the path to us obtaining our liberation can be achieved through, as you put it, above board strategies, so to speak, right? So if you look at the arguments that are laid out by people like Chris Hedges and in his book America: The Farewell Tour, and some of the conclusions that have been reached by many of our scholars who have actively engaged in organizing, such as your Garveys, your Malcolm X's, in terms of the limitations of legal means, right, to achieve liberation, could that in and of itself be considered another myth, if you're saying that, we cannot, finance our own liberation, and the only means of doing so is through politically organizing for the purpose of capturing the state? Because I think there are some barriers there that if we examine what would likely prove themselves to be just as untenable as this whole myth of black buying power.
Absolutely. So first of all, you are right, whether you're playing devil's advocate or sharing your position. You have you're raising a very valid point. I mean, it's a legit criticism. On the one hand, I was compelled to have a form of a solution to include with this book. Every time I raise this critique, I'm compelled to offer up a solution. And I'm rarely in a space where I feel comfortable maybe sharing beyond that argument what I think needs to occur, in part because I don't think it's for public conversation necessarily, and also because many of the people that I end up engaging in this discussion are not really looking to go in a more leftward or radical militant direction anyway. What they're really saying is I don't like that you've criticized what my decided path was to liberation, and now I want you to offer up a solution that is equally easy and comfortable for me. So in some ways, I'm admitting that my argument here could be argued or somewhat dismissed as a cop out of sorts. But on the other hand, I'm actually advocating for an engagement with electoral politics and the political apparatus that is more of akin to at least the wing of his argument towards that endeavor that made by Malcolm X. That is, if our goal is the redistribution of gross domestic product, if our goal is to say we don't need to have any more conversations about charities or reparations or minimum wages or closing income and wealth gaps, what we need is a redirection of the wealth we're already creating. One, it improves our understanding of the economy just in general, and I think makes us better, organizers or activists or analysts of our moment. The other thing is that it encourages us to, I think, raise our standards for our engagement with the political apparatus. So at least to the extent that I think you're right that there would be all kinds of blockages and barriers and whatever, we wouldn't be able to be bought off, as I see happening now, with vote for Biden because he's better than Trump. Because the standard of the question would still be, well, are you going to redistribute that 20 trillion so that none of us are without housing, healthcare, quality food, education, and so on? And Biden is just as much a no. So in some regards, it in fact, I think, encourages a more radical approach, not only to quote unquote mainstream politics and activism, but I think would naturally lead people to reach the same conclusions and raise the same questions that I ended up raising, and that Hedges raises, and that anyone who engages the system with an attempt to change it ends up raising once they can see the system's response. So I don't want to discourage you or anyone else from being critical of that of my claimed solution, as long as we can at least agree and get to the part that I'm really only hoping for, that no longer will we involve the myth of buying power in whatever plans we develop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say, and we have lots of questions coming in the chat here, and family. We only have Dr. Ball here today with us for about 40 minutes, but he will be one of the speakers during the RBG Centennial Conference on day one of the conference. So if you missed the opportunity to engage with him today, you'll definitely have the opportunity. Well, I don't want to say definitely, but if you come with some good questions, they might get selected.
And I'll come back to this group too, and I again apologize for all of that. That's all my fault. So I'm happy to come back and do this again with this group, or find another way, and people can hit me up at I Mix What I Like, and I'll do what I can. But certainly at your conference, if they come up with a selectable question,
yeah, so
I'll happily address it.
So I want to just keep pushing you just a little bit further, and so we can get things to like their logical conclusion, so to speak. Because if we start with the premise that we cannot finance our own liberation, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that particular premise. And the only reason I would kind of push back on that is because you mentioned that Black people annually, we bring in about $800 billion And if we look at like remittances, for example, for like the Nigerian community here in the United States, annually they're remitting upwards of $22 billion, back over to Nigeria, and that's elements of their disposable income. So I think that the way that we kind of like organize ourselves as a people speaks to the way that we organize our resources. And because Black America is not necessarily organized as a people, we look at ourselves as individuals looking to make it into mainstream white society, then we aren't necessarily remitting anything back into Black America, right? And I think a part of that argument that um, the $1.3 trillion myth is built upon might have an element of truth. So there could be some risk in throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Meaning, if we accept, okay, that the 1.3 is non-existent, which you've done great scholarship to show that, hey, that doesn't exist. But the other part of that argument is that the resources that we do have do not stay within our community, right? The money that we do earn is not currently being remitted back into Black America. All the money that we have is going directly into white America. So would you say that that particular behavior or spending pattern impacts or weakens our ability, even if we could potentially finance our own liberation?
I mean, you could argue that, but again, well, so the first thing I would want to ask is, and I don't know enough about this, to be frank. So but initially on its surface, my initial response is the remittances that you're talking about that go back to Nigeria. To what extent do they impact inequality there? And to what extent so here we would have the problem of the money being transferred over to the white state, where Nigeria, at least the face of the state is Black or African. But I don't know to what extent Nigeria or any African country controls its finances or its resources or its wealth. And I don't know to what extent the remittances or the money going back to Nigeria closes any inequality gaps in those communities or is used to that end.
No,
So,
exactly. So,
yeah.
I would argue that the money is definitely not being used in any liberatory manner, right? But the argument that I'm making is that people who are earning, right, folks here who are of an immigrant population who earn in the white economy, their earnings are oftentimes supporting 25 other people back where they're from. So when they're deploying these resources back, to their native communities, the resources right now are not being used in any revolutionary way. I think that is an element of consciousness. But what I'm arguing is, in Black America, there are resources that could be deployed back into our community. And if our community has the right consciousness, which is also an aspect of organizing, then those resources could, in theory, be used in a way to help self-finance our liberation. Right. This is one of the arguments that Garvey made, that was critical of Du Bois, where Garvey said, I'd rather have a dusty brick house that is my own than the house that Du Bois has that is financed by white money. So Garvey argued essentially this media and propaganda apparatus that we built for our liberation is one that has been financed and paid for by black money.
Except that again, he didn't. And again, part of the problem is always we have to assess this in the context of what's being done externally. So whether we're talking about Black Wall Street or Garvey or anybody else or even Du Bois, there's an external imposition and impact that negatively operates against all of these efforts. But essentially what I would argue, I guess, and again, my book doesn't address the specifics of Garvey's movement or any specific endeavor. Ultimately, I don't trace it all the way through, but ultimately what I would be arguing is that Garvey's movement could not have led to what he would or we would have wanted it to, in part because Black people just don't earn enough, don't have enough money that even if it's redistributed in the way that you're talking about, it would accumulate to the amount that would be required to close these gaps or overturn these inequalities. And in part, what I'm arguing that is, again, it's not just about the material count or the accumulated count of money. It is the political power that allows for that money to become wealth. That is part of the political apparatus. So again, part of Garvey's problem was that we didn't have enough political power to support him, to protect him from being COINTELPRO or FBI or whatever it was called at the time out of the country, or to have his business plan interrupted. The business community, the elite white business community in particular, has captured the political apparatus that gives them the protection to do the things that they do with their businesses. It gives them tariff and tax protection. It gives them military conquest protection. We can't forget that what's happening in Iraq and Afghanistan, what has been happening in this country from day one, has been the military conquest of other parts of the world to make them safe for American business. Garvey didn't have that backing, so he would, Du Bois didn't have that backing from the other end of the African political spectrum. So in each case, is what I'm saying here, buying power as a concept is not sufficient to get us where we need to go, and that's why I keep trying to argue for this political. The power we have is in the movement building, the people power, the ability to shut things down, to interrupt things, to become a problem, or to raise, in this case, political questions in an organized fashion that are different from mainstream politics, and to try to push things differently. Ultimately, everything that we would try to do, business-wise or otherwise, in this country, will require some support or solidarity or collective interest with other communities. There will have to be other communities signing off on a variety of different things, whether it's a redistribution of wealth, whether it's a redistribution of political power. There's going to have to be something. So the sovereignty and autonomy that I think many of us want and are looking for, I don't think we can get, at least not by a business path forward. Again, we have to be thinking about assuming political power. So the last point I would just try to make in terms of this comparison with the Nigerian community is that similarly, a lot of Black American workers are working to earn to support other family members in a broader extended family. Don't have a nominal country the way Nigerians might have to go home to, so to speak, to send money home to, but money is sent, for instance, from north to south, from east to west, and vice versa, et cetera. People help each other. But the problem is Black people, and I would argue the same thing for any other African community, Nigerians included, don't earn enough to overturn the colonialism, the imperialism that set these inequalities in motion, and that continues to set these inequalities and keep them in motion to this day. That's not how wealth is created. No community has ever created wealth this way. And no community as powerless politically as we are would be able to do something no other community has been able to do. And then lastly, by the way, this is not to have show a massive concern for white America, but we do have to remember that even within this white supremacist, capitalist, imperialist, colonial settler colony, a great amount of white workers, increasingly white people across this country, cannot sustain themselves in this economy in a country that was nominally built for them either. So again, because they themselves don't have political power. So anyway, that's at least how I'm trying to argue it. You've raised many good questions. I'm sure there are many more, and I can't claim and can't be ever expected to have solved this all on my own anyway. But that would be my reaction to that.
All right. How much more time do we have you for, Dr. Ball?
What time is it? At least 15 more minutes. Yeah, and I apologize for that, but yes.
So family, since we only have 15 more minutes, I'm going to ask one last question on my end, and then I'll start to snatch a few from the chat, because I'm seeing lots of questions in both YouTube and the Zoom chat. So the last question that I have, Dr. Ball, is it seems that we really appreciate your work and criticizing this myth of Black buying power and showing us that it is a myth. I think that was absolutely necessary. So the whole wing of strategies that are built on that myth, like, we can kind of do away with, because I think that's necessary in our political development and also in our political maturation. That's necessary. But it seems that part of your posit is to say that, instead of focusing on the 1 trillion, myth, why not focus on the 22 trillion and real dollars that we know exist, and being that of the GDP. And my argument, or I guess question, or my argument posed as a question, right, would be um, that 22 trillion that we are referring to can only be created as long as we as black people remain subjugated, because as you mentioned, the accumulation or the attainment of that 22 trillion is ultimately built upon military conquest, and it's maintained through that same terror. So what Garvey's argument was that in the end, right, because his strategy just was not solely economic, he said that in the end, any of our strategies are going to have to contain the element of force, because what was taken from us was taken via force, and it cannot be reclaimed without force. So that's part of my statement. But the question becomes, when we think of this idea of even if we accepted that we were okay with the subjugation and the way that that 22 trillion was generated, the concept of that 22 trillion being able to be redistributed, both Garvey and Du Bois said it was problematic, because Du Bois stated that in Socialism and the Negro Problem, that white society is trying to figure out how can we redistribute it while also excluding black people from attaining any of it. And Garvey is saying the same thing, that if poor whites are redistributing it, their racism will not allow us to get a part of it. So how do we, and you might not have an answer for this, but how do we overcome that part of the redistribution problem, meaning the part of white racism not wanting us to have it in the first place?
So I don't know entirely. Part of my argument again is that I want to raise the standard of our approach to all of this. So I want to get us away from we have to vote for whatever Democrat. I want to get us away from we have to somehow be more responsible with what money we have, and that will get us free. I want to get us away from that. If part of my hope is that if for some reason my argument was to take hold and more of us were to say, we want to redistribute the GDP, that this would, in some at least theoretical way, be a material approach to avoiding conflict and avoiding, to a certain extent, a direct confrontation with the white supremacy that would come about. For instance, the argument would be with whites and whoever, we don't need to be arguing with one another over who gets what and how much who should get and who should get what and what we should do. We don't need to, in this regard, be pitted against one another. We are all contributing to this GDP. It's all being redistributed upwards to the 1%. And if it was redistributed differently in an infrastructural way, so that people had, again, free healthcare, housing, et cetera, and so forth, at least theoretically, that would mitigate the racism in white America. It would negate their need to argue that they need to compete with us or anyone else to get what they are helping to contribute. It would again help us better understand the way the economy works and our relationship to it. And then I do also think, to borrow again some Marxist language, it would heighten some contradictions and force many of us to come up with new questions or to address these questions differently, and maybe make different conclusions about what we need to do. So again, I'm less interested in the advocacy portion of my argument in terms of this GDP question than I am in the initial part of just trying to get rid of that myth of buying power. And I'm certainly, as I've always argued, what has ever been on the table for Black liberation should always be on the table now and forever. So I don't want to limit what people come up with. I just want people to come up with something on the basis of our actual relationship to this economy and to an understanding of how this economy actually functions.
Beautiful. All right. So, family, I see lots of questions. Many of them are answered in the text. He gave us a free copy to the text that I shared with everyone. So one question I saw, it said, if it's a myth for us, then why is it a reality for other non-Black people? So Dr. Ball answered that. at the beginning. He said that it's a myth for them as well, but it's more pernicious when you look at the way that the myth impacts us. So he's not
Yeah,
arguing.
no other community that I've ever seen has the myth directed at them as a pathway to their liberation. It's only to us, and this I do talk a little bit about in the book. This is the direct result of the Nixonian era, codifying it with the beginning of the Johnson era in the 50s, and the deal that he and other black commercial presses were making with the white commercial elite. This is in some way a collaborative effort that impacts our community differently. But buying power, and I still get the Google alert, they assess everybody, not only every racial group, but every segment of a municipality and municipalities themselves. I mean, corporations and countries have their buying power assessed. Everybody has it assessed, but it's again a marketing tool. And it's only when it's turned on us that they say that this is how we can get free. And that's why another reason why you can know it's myth. It's a black op. It's psychological warfare.
Brother Rich, can you unmute and ask your question? Because you've asked it in like 4 different, like you keep rephrasing it a little bit. So if you just unmute and ask it, because I don't want to butcher your question.
Yeah. I was, let me see, I'm thinking of the Black financial and business class. How much are they in, I'm gonna call it cahoots, with the Black commercial press as you lay out as the mechanism of the myth being generated? How much are they in cahoots to maintaining the myth? That's, I guess, in the short.
The short answer is they are entirely wrapped up in it, and have been for a long time. And, you know, going back to E. Franklin Fraser's point about the Black bourgeoisie, they live in a fantasy that an isolated Black economy will create for them. And in some ways it's true, a version, a lifestyle that they wouldn't otherwise be able to appreciate. And we have to recognize, and this is where the class question does become essential for us, because even, you know, as we want to be in solidarity with the race, there are segments among us who benefit so much from this inequality that they're happy to promote it and perpetuate it. And that's why we still have, even, you know, whether it's Candace Owens on one extreme end today, or you know, Walter Williams on a more, you know, relatively speaking, moderate end of that same argument. There are Black people who are arguing to this day that there is no oppression that is akin certainly to what has existed, and it's the inequality we suffer is largely due to our being irresponsible and financially illiterate, and in part because they benefit as a business class, whether they get the corporate ad revenue that is in the hundreds of billions that everybody's fighting for, or whether they get the direct, you know, expenditures from us to help their business and support their business, but they're not redistributing anything they're making back to us in any meaningful way, and they're not supporting policies that would help the broader community. They are, as we hear about even with professional athletes all the time, they end up admitting that they end up voting Republican even because they're now in a certain tax bracket that they want to protect. So, I mean, we have a major problem. And then, as I start off with, it is the Black commercial press that is promoting this mythology. And as I talk about in the book, and as it relates to my own work, literally erasing the critique from their pages. Yeah, they're highly wrapped up in it. And we need to find a way to, as family, in a loving way, perhaps, address them and get them to come up off some of that behavior.
in a loving way. But I'll take one last question, family, because we don't have Dr. Ball. Brother Damani Keene, did you have a question?
No, sir, I do not. Just greetings to my brother Jared.
Brother Damani, it's good to hear from you.
Always, bro.
All right. Do we have any other questions? If you want, you can unmute. I'm only going to take one question. We can continue to chop it up after Dr. Ball leaves, but he is on daddy duty, you know, so black dads rock. We got to definitely allow him to do his thing out there with the children. So if we don't have any other questions, I'm going to allow Dr. Ball to depart, but I'm going to give y'all 10 seconds to ask the question. And 9, 8.
I have one, but since I asked one, I don't want to, you know.
Go ahead, Brother Rich. It's your lucky day.
And because, you know, your area is media, and I think the really other thing that we should focus on is propaganda, right? The power of propaganda and how it. So what I wanted to get your twist, because we're seeing that the propaganda mechanism now it is being pushed in the digital age. Can you just elaborate, how should we look at this whole propaganda machine and creating myths like Wakanda, as an example?
Oh man, you know, again, propaganda is in the title of the book and is a focus because I'm not an economist, and the argument about buying power, I think, ultimately is easily dismissed at the economic level. It's really a question of the propaganda, and I think many of in our community don't appreciate fully the role propaganda plays and has played in this country in particular, and we, especially in light of this new digital environment. We have, and many of us have been completely tricked and fallen prey to what has been an intentionally designed media apparatus. And we're not, you know, so part of what I do talk about in the book is some of the history behind the development of post-World War II propaganda in this country and the role it played. But I would want, you know, I would really want us to talk more about it. And I would like to do more work on this because there are many in the white left community that many of us don't pay attention to. And I'm not necessarily advocating that change, but and other than in this instance, there are some very important developments that we're missing out on, where in particular, affluent, you know, white, elite, suburban men in particular, but women as well, are being punished with life sentences and being pushed to suicide, in part because they're trying to reveal the actual nature of our media environment. So when you're looking at even the way the state attacks them, not only do we need to at least understand what's happening, but need to better understand what could happen to us, but better understand how to use these media or to engage them. And we need to be highly concerned. You know, at the end of the day, you know, these Zoom things are great. The technology is great. I'm on it all the time, more than I should be, but real organization has to be offline, off the record, off mic, off camera. That's where real discussions and solutions and strategies and tactics will evolve. And that's the only real way that organizations can circumvent this propaganda system. I mean, you know, the intelligence community, for instance, not only has helped develop our social media environment, but uses it remarkably to promote stories, suppress stories, to direct traffic, redirect traffic, to push us and put us under surveillance, to monitor us, and to create an environment online that mirrors nothing like the world outside of our computers and phones. And for every good tweet and message we send, they're able to magnify, as they say, multiple force message, or message force multiply their versions, using sock puppet technology to magnify themselves as social media puppets, to surveil us and create advertising and clickbait. Anyway, there's just a tremendous amount being done. And then finally, as I sort of started with, there has been a way to promote a punditry that unlike any other time before, has made it more and more difficult for us to be, I think, in direct contact with many of our contemporary leadership, or punditry class, or more appropriate punditry class, so to speak, or journalism and media that we need to be caught up to. I mean, there's so many problems that I see happening, where online movements and hashtag movements can evolve and erupt and emerge, without our involvement, without our even acknowledgement or awareness, and interrupt our conversation. I mean, all kinds of stuff is happening. So I just think we need to be much more involved and attuned and paying attention to, and aware of the history of this propaganda. I mean, my field of study was developed specifically so that they could learn how to create Americans out of white Europeans, and how to create Negroes and Black people out of Africans, and how to create all of us and turn all of us into citizen consumers, and to equate citizenship with consumption. This has all been explicitly discussed by just the founders of my so-called field of study for decades. And yet, in practice, it is very difficult for me and we in many ways penetrate that created wall. So you're right to raise the question. I hope I've done some service in an answer, and I do definitely think that that's something that we need to be more appreciative of going forward, especially as we're looking to organize and resist what's happening now, which is all being responded to through propaganda. I want to close by saying one thing that I didn't include in the book was that in 2018, the Air Force was already doing war games and preparations for what they were calling the Z-bellion of Generation Z, where they already knew that white, black, et cetera, were going to be frustrated to the point of rebellion, given all the mythologies that they had been told that weren't going to come true. And part of their response is not only military, but it's propaganda, PR, psychological warfare, to rebrand the struggle, to rebrand punditry, to rebrand movements and histories, to accept not only what's happening, but their prescriptions for how we should respond going forward. So again, I apologize for messing up the schedule, and I thank you all very much, man.
You all good, Dr. Ball. We appreciate you joining us today. Just really quick in 30 seconds, in the spirit of the week of return, what does the red, black, and green flag mean to you, brother? 30 seconds.
Oh, red, black, and green means liberation, sovereignty, and freedom. I mean, the blood, the people, the land. It means free the land. It means free our political prisoners. It means don't forget our struggle is incomplete. It means we are not free. It means that flag, the Confederate flag was not the real problem. The Confederacy was only in power for 4 years. The red, white, and blue has done so much more damage to our African world community than the Confederacy, and continues to do so. So the red, black, and green is a constant, beautiful reminder of where our focus needs to be.
All right. Appreciate you, Dr. Ball.
Thank you all very much. Peace, everybody. Take care.
All right. Peace. All right, family. I'll let y'all can tap in. I was getting a couple of messages in the chat, and people were telling me that my questions were too long. I don't want to be the only one on camera here, so y'all gotta. And mind you,
I'm showing my face a little bit. That was really interesting.
We're still streaming live, so this is still a part of our general membership meeting discussion. So as Dr. Ball said, some conversations should not happen in public, should not be recorded. So in the spirit of that, let's try to keep our commentary aligned. Brother Damani Keene, this is our first time seeing you, brother. You wanted to introduce yourself?
Yes, I will. Give me a message that you stopped my video.
Oh yeah, okay. I mean,
yes, I've been watching several of the programs of AI, and very impressed with the discussions. And so this is, I think, the first time I've been live. No, it's the second time I've been live. I watched the earlier debate, I'll say, about objectivity.
mm-hmm.
Thought that was very interesting. And I didn't know when I first tuned in that Jared was going to be on. It turns out to have several things in common. So in our backgrounds, so it was that was very interesting.
Gotcha.
He is someone who displays constantly a degree of humility that, in my opinion, is rare among someone who is so accomplished in what in the work that he's doing. So, I enjoy that about him.
So, brother Damani, how'd you come to find out about our chapter? I know we get people that sign up for our listserv all the time.
I know. Well, first of all, let me send greetings. My wife and I live in the Republic of Panama. We've been here about 15 years, but my connection goes back a couple of decades or more with Dr. Molefi Asante, and so I've been, a student of his work. And as a matter of fact, I should say, this is a good time to say this, that just as this group appears to have benefited from his work, my wife and I leaned on Afrocentricity, the Afrocentric idea, and some of his other work in the writing of an Afrocentric historical novel that we just recently self-published. So anything with AI, when I see it, you know, I want to check it out. And Brother Omowale, you do a great job, man. Maybe your questions are too long, some people think, but but you do a great job, and I appreciate the work that you put in.
Well, we appreciate you too, Brother Damani. Hopefully, you and your wife will be able to join us next weekend for the conference, 2-day conference, the RBG Centennial. I'll have someone share a link to it in the chat. But aside from that, family, you all know that in the fall, we'll be publishing our list of activities for our general membership meetings for the fall. So they won't be very lecture based, but we're trying to figure it out. It'll be more workshops. There'll be a lot more engaging and involved. Not that these guest lectures that we've had have not been engaging, but we just want to make sure that we are tapping into all of your different senses as a community. All right, family, any thoughts on today's presentation? This is the time to discuss. I don't like being the only one on camera here, and we are streaming live on YouTube, so it looks like I'm just talking to myself.
You know, I'm trying not to, you know, and look, y'all, I can run my mouth, so, or at least try to think out loud. So I'm listening for the rest of us so I can learn more. But you know, I follow Dr. Ball, and I just like really impressed in him, you know, presenting this here myth. One thing, I think the two things that, you know, the thing that you responded, you're picking up on in relationship to at what point can we be able to finance our own liberation if what he's saying is true in dollars and cents, and more important than dollars and cents, because that's just income, in ownership of productive output, you know, outputs. I think that's what your question was raising. And besides the remittance part, I think that's like really a really good and critical question we have to deal with as far as how do we create
Yeah, and I was trying to push, and I appreciated him saying that the solution that he presented is not really the focus of the work. The focus of the work was problematizing the whole notion of the myth, the black buying power myth, because the above ground solutions are also, in my opinion, I would say they're equally myth. And in terms of us financing our liberation, I mean, our ancestors were enslaved, so they didn't have any resources, but they had the will, and they were willing to pay the ultimate price, and that being blood. Not that I want to take the conversation in that direction in these YouTube streets, but I'm just want to make it clear that I don't know how much I want to make clear for y'all if it's not already clear.
And this is the thing that I'm hoping others who are on, take us in other directions. But one thing that I've been pushing, I guess I'm asking, is that there is a segment, we could even say the black middle class, right? I mean, the black business class, the financial class, that they have a vested interest in reform compared to actually development of a system, a race-based system outside of the existing one that exists. But when we look at the historical trajectory, and I guess I'm throwing it out there, it's not just the black middle class when you talk about consciousness, right? When you say black people's consciousness, regardless of the class they're in, are tied to maintaining this Western, to being subordinate in this Western system. And you can take that back to the 18th century, almost to the 17th century. There is a group that has a vested interest in maintaining this system as it is, and all they want is just to get a piece of the rock.
Absolutely. And this is something that I want us to, and this is why I want us to always work to become politically mature, because sometimes you can tell what a person is saying by the things that they are not saying. And that class of people that you were referring to, Brother Rich, you have to learn to be able to decipher their actions and their words to pick up on what's not being said explicitly. And that is that they have accept domination, they have
Right.
accept slavery. So therefore, the only solutions that they are interested in hearing are solutions that are A, nonviolent, but B, allow them to continue to gain access to some of the comfort that they've carved out for themselves on the plantation. So I think that that is often not spoken. And I think that we as a community have a problem calling out our enemies. I mean, even Dr. Ball, when he was speaking today, he kept saying comrades, colleagues, and friends, but not all colleagues are our comrades, and not all Black people are our friends. So I think that we have to get to the point where we start identifying folks who are clearly committed to maintaining comfort on the plantation, and deal with them accordingly.
Um, if I may, you know, because it's one thing that I'm looking at for those of us who are looking at implementing the vision that Mr. Garvey put out or the UNIA put out. The question comes in more about, and we had started in other conversations, how do we identify each other, and how do we solidify? You know, I think I was listening to one of your presentations, and you were the core value, the 4 elements of the core values of AI. Well, you know, to build that kind of leadership, but we have to be able to recognize that it's not about converting those others more than about strengthening the ties and as a sovereign people, and that has to be manifest in a certain way. That's, you know, so identifying and strengthening, recognizing, I think you made in your question, being able to know that it's going to, even to do that, may bring on opposition, internal opposition and external opposition.
All right, apparently there's a button here on Zoom where I can turn on everybody's cameras. So I'm about to do that because y'all keep leaving me on the screen by myself. Like, I'm pretty sure the viewers are looking like, yeah, why is Brother Omawale talking to himself? Brother Alfred Thinker, yeah, we'll share a link with you right now. See, we're gonna let Brother ask. See, there's some brothers who want to come join us from here you go.
I sent it to him.
All right, okay, I just dropped it in the YouTube. Yeah. See, this is why I miss having meetings in person, because can't nobody escape being put on the spot when we meeting in person, because we all sitting in that circle at the Institute. So now y'all got me sitting on YouTube, the only face showing. Sister L Boogie, what were your thoughts? What were your thoughts, L Boogie?
I've been a fan since the very beginning. Well, not a fan, but I've been really interested in the book and what, you know, the premise from the very beginning. What I would have liked to hear him talk about, or even, I mean, it's probably comical, but he talks about the myth and propaganda into what Brother Rich is. I think that's really what we're fighting, because right now you got all these people out here who are teaching Black people, oh, become financial literate, put your money in stocks when you learn this, or like, so they're not really teaching anything that's liberatory, right? Like, that's liberation. What they're telling people is to go back into the system. So there's this double talking that we're doing, right? We're telling you, okay, you could reach financial freedom X, Y, and Z, and then at the same time, oh, the system is not built for us, but you telling us to go back, put our money back into the system. So I think Brother Rich brought something up to me that I think really is the main thing, is the propaganda, right? Because once we see what the game is, at that point, we should be really thinking about, okay, well, how do we individually see it? And collectively, how does that thought translate to our community, right? And even starting with our children and our family. So, I mean, it was a lot to unpack. But I I don't see it easing up. Like I don't, because one, and I've said it a lot of times, we are a politically immature group, right? And that's really, what the premise is. But when people trying to chase the bag and you got somebody telling them this is the way to get the bag, it's going to be hard to tell them that that's propaganda. You know what I'm saying? Especially if they don't have a nation state of mind, if you will. I'm biting off of your tag, but if they don't have,
Okay, I'm gonna get some T-shirts made that say "Nation State of Mind." I've been meaning to do that for the last 4 years because that's why I keep it as my Twitter moniker.
yeah. So I think people, to be honest with you, I don't know if people really. I think it's just all about the bag. I really don't. I think it's easy for them to leave.
It's like that scene. It's like that scene on The Matrix when the dude is eating the steak after he sold out everybody, and he's like, "Listen, I know that this steak is. I know that it's this is just lines of code that I'm tasting here, but like I want to believe. You understand what I'm saying? Like I rather
Right.
the delusion. I rather hold on to the delusion because what you're asking me to embrace is you saw how Neil and them was living on the ship. They was eating
Yeah.
slop and
Right.
wearing rags. Like people like, nah, I'm not really trying to live like that if that's what
Right.
liberation is. I'd
Right.
rather have access to the delusion. And
the conversation that we had the other way, like I don't really like this sovereignty and it's really getting free. It's hard work. It's gonna take a lot of work, and I think a lot of people too. Well, what he's saying, we should also like keep in mind what he's saying, or what everyone is saying is that even if we don't see it in our lifetime, we got to put the work in, because the ones behind us, we got to set something in motion for them. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, the myth and propaganda. So now it's like square one. Now how do we rethink what is being thrown at us as, what I'm saying, the African community? So back.
Another thing we don't do enough of, Sister Lydia, we don't take our cues from history. How many
Right.
rebellions of our ancestors on the plantation were stopped because a loyal slave went and told the master?
Right.
How many of those rebellions were put down because you had some Christian slaves who said, "No, I can't kill massa." That's what I mean. So I think that we ain't taking our cues to the point that we have lots and lots of loyal slaves still around us on the plantation today. And I think that that's the reason when we had Professor Henderson here 2 weeks ago, and he talked about Nat Turner's strategy, and that to some of the folks on the plantation, they thought Nat Turner was a coon, but Nat Turner had to move in the wisdom of darkness. You know what I mean? Like he couldn't be seen because he knew that if he unveiled what he was trying to do, it was likely that it would be stopped because you would have some loyal slaves that would run back. Just like what's the brother's name? Frederick Douglass tells in his story when they were planning to escape, and they found out on the day of, and the master's wife came out and gave the hot biscuits to the two guys who snitched. So I'm just saying we got to be real that we got a lot of loyal slaves that are willing to sell us out for hot biscuits.
Yeah, like I always say, we talk. Sometimes we talk to certain people way too much. My thing. Like we sometimes, like he said, sometimes we gotta practice discernment now. Like we gotta really, really get into this discernment thing. You know what I'm saying? I'll leave it at this. We talk a lot about our ancestors and bringing that back. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes we got to just move. We got to move different, right? And we can't always tell people what's on our mind and what our strategy is, because we just don't. It's no room for doubt right now. We kind of just gotta go. So I would like going forward, not only for us to take cues in history, but to really tap into that discernment and really utilize that as well.
Exactly, because we got real comfortable with this technology, but it's time for us to be strategic and talk offline, and we need to talk about what taking power looks like, and we need to move underground accordingly.
Yeah, the thing that I love about our enemies is that they are so arrogant and that they are willing to let us to come together in these groups like this, because what they've learned is that, or what they believe is that, let the niggas talk. Nothing's going to come of it. They're very, very arrogant. They don't believe that we are capable of doing anything. So, they're more than willing to let us come into spaces like this. And certain things don't got to be said in spaces like this. But I'm just saying, I know that our enemies are an arrogant people. So.
Well, if we have time and if nobody else, I mean, Brother Omwale, since you want us to talk and whatnot, maybe you could ask everybody on the line what the red, black, and green mean to them. You know what I'm saying? So.
I mean, since you threw it out there, I'm gonna ask you to start first, sis. What does that
Oh
red,
no,
black,
I don't
and
want to
green
step
mean?
on. I mean, maybe other people got comments on the maybe other people got comments on Dr. Ball, so I don't want to, what I'm saying, not give you the opportunity to ask them if they got anything
No,
else.
you're right. You're right. We do like to try to wrap up before 2:45 on our general membership meeting. So what I like to do is, if we have any other commentary on the presentation today from Dr. Jared Ball, I'll create space for that. And then we'll just close out by just going around and asking everybody what the red, black, and green means to them. Brother Achille, you had a lot of questions while he was here, Brother Achille.
Brother Omawale, let me just say real quick, I've got to run. I appreciate seeing everybody, and thank you for the great work that you all are doing. Sister LB, I appreciated your comments very much, and Sister Tahara as well. And I will see you next time. You all take care. Have a great day.
Thank you as well.
Thank you, Brother Damani.
Power to the people.
All right, family. We're gonna start with you, sister. Okay, brother. Go ahead, Brother Achille.
Okay, peace. Okay, so I have so many questions, but instead of just just flooding the especially since he's not here, I cannot for the life of me remember where you posted his book. So if you could throw that down in the chat, that would be great. So that way I can study it for myself and get acquainted with it, because I don't know. I have a lot of questions. Even when I was working and then listening to the brother, and my mind was just racing with so many questions. So I think it's better that I get into the text instead of trying to.
Well, no,
flesh them out.
I'll tell you what. I'll share the text with you because it's on Slack. We shared it with the group on Slack. It's right in the general channel on Slack, but we can share it again. But what was your? I saw one that you posted where you were asking. Hold on, where is it? You said, I want to make sure that I'm understanding his position correctly. Is he saying that we need to ask the government for policy to redistribute wealth from the top 1%?
Right,
and,
because oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't want to mischaracterize what he's arguing, because he ultimately said that the solution that he's presenting is only one, because people typically, when he criticizes the myth of black buying power, they ask, well, then what's the solution? So he wanted to present an above the board solution, so to speak. So his argument is, it really is it's a, we should organize ourselves politically for the purposes of forming, I would say, a multiracial political coalition to recapture the state and redistribute the wealth of the state. So and at risk of overly simplifying what he's putting out, is essentially, yes, he's saying not that we should ask, but that we should force the government to redistribute the wealth from the top 1%. So I think that most of us here see that equally, kind of like as a myth, like the ability for that to occur.
Okay. So, I was just making sure that I'm not.
But he ended by saying that everything that has always been on the table historically in terms of our means for solving the problem should still be on the table today. So he I guess he stressed that to say that you know, that isn't the sole thing that he's advocating for. But at
Okay.
least if he can get people to move away from the myth of propaganda, then they can start themselves down the journey of going to the next, you know, door and knocking at that door. And eventually, when you knock on enough doors, you'll realize, like, okay, I just got to burn down the house. And,
Okay.
you know,
So let me just say this. Well, first, I'm actually involved in a lot of text right now, but when you post that, that will be moved to the top of the list. And I will look forward to. I will be in his particular lecture on the RBG Centennial without question. But I'm glad that you asked him about there being a confrontation on some level, because there will be, and it's inevitable. And asking the 1% or galvanizing a multicultural, however you want to say it, again, like you said, that is equally a myth. So I agree with you on all that. But before I offer any more opinions, I'm going to read his text and then scrutinize it and then go from there. So thank you for letting me chime in.
all right. Is this brother Afri Thinker? Peace, brother. You wanted to unmute and ask your question?
It's not even really a question. Greetings, everybody from London. It's really, I'm honored to have heard Dr. Ball today. This is kind of, it just keeps on growing with you.
Your audio is a little muffled. Is it just me, or is it for everybody?
It must be me. Maybe it's mine, because I've got this mic on. Is this any better?
Slightly, yes. Yeah, slightly better. Slightly.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys.
Okay.
It's probably my headset. Yeah, just greeting everybody. I haven't really got a question. I mean, I suppose I think it was absolutely priceless. You know, I think we're getting closer and closer from the things I've seen on Twitter and around. I think we're getting closer and closer to what the crux of the issues are for our people in terms of getting rid of some of the peripheral and getting to the central kind of thing, that the problem or that we have, the task that we have at hand. And the more we actually understand that it is really about force. What happened to us has been taken by force, and it's going to require collective force for us to take it back. And that's the thing. We can't buy our way out of it, can't plead our way out of it, we can't march our way out of it, we can't pray our way out of it. And there's so much of that around when I'm kind of like just speaking to different people on and offline. So it's great to hear exactly what the issue is. And this particular thing about the myth of buying is particularly kind of insidious, and it's found its roots within our people who really believe in it in the same way, really, that people believe in a religion. You know what I mean? They're attached to it in that way. And so to get rid of that, to unroot that, that's the very core of being able to live every day, you know, to be able to eat. You know, this is the thing that's really important. I think one thing that I would want to say in response to that realization is this other, just so that we get an understanding of what the magnitude of the problem is that I do believe that one of the issues is, even when it comes to Dr. Ball referred to the essentially, I'll put it like the more or less disenfranchised whites at the bottom who are not really in the system either. The system's not made for them. The problem, even with trying to get those people on board in any kind of alliance, is that they dream of being the billionaire. They dream of being the oppressor. They only really want, they're not unhappy with the system, they're unhappy with their position in it. Some of our people are now turning that way as well. So what we need is to have these kinds of ideas and the propagation of ideas, and we need even greater thinkers to find a way to lock into the psyche, to get that unrooted. And I think without that, we do have some pretty intractable problems on the numbers, and otherwise. I think
Appreciate
that
you,
just came
brother.
across.
I don't know. We appreciate you, my brother.
Yeah,
That was
yes,
well
yes,
said.
yes.
Very
I
well
can hear you.
said. Very well said.
Thank you. That's
Family,
great.
do we have any other uh commentary before we get ready to close out and let you enjoy the rest of your day? All right, really quickly, what I like is just all of us who are on the line, just really quick. I'm gonna start with my sister L Boogie. What does that red, black, and green mean to you? And if you don't have your tickets for the conference, I'm gonna put the link to the conference in the YouTube. Go get your tickets today. It's next weekend. So I'm gonna start with you, Sister L Boogie. What does that red, black, and green mean to you? All right, I think she dropped off. Oh, she's trying to get back on. So while she's waiting, I'm gonna go to Brother Rich. Brother Rich, what does that red, black, and green mean to you?
At this point, I guess I'll just say it's you know, what the intent was as far as being a global people, creating a global infrastructure that can produce and be protected. That's what it means.
Brother Roger, Brother Afrodinka.
Yeah, well, to me, I suppose it means so many things, but the thoughts that are in my head now, the representation of a globalized Black African-centered nation, with this complete disregard for not only the colonial boundaries that we have imposed on us now, you know, globally, just complete disregard for them. Wherever our people are, wherever their feet are, it's our land, and also the dream. Well, I don't want to use that word dream. The vision of our people, even on the continent, dispensing with all, going beyond where we came from to that point, and dissolving even all those boundaries, even those imaginary boundaries, those tribal boundaries, that we become one people. And you know, the whole vision of complete liberation, not only that will improve us, that is actually like the true course that you know, our true place, our true destiny, and a destiny for the whole world that is better than what we see now. That's what that represents. Thank you.
All right, who's next? Who's next? Brother
I'll take a stab at it. And I'll keep it simple. To me, the RBG flag, or you know, RBG and Marcus Garvey, for me is just the answer. You know, it's the blueprint. You know what I'm saying? It's where we could start. And as time goes on, we have the liberty, each generation with what's going on, to innovate, like I said before, to innovate without losing its integrity. So, you know, if we're looking for the answer, that's where we can start. We can start with the RBG, Marcus Garvey, and his philosophy, and I think everything else will fall into place after that.
Brother Shanuti.
Thank you. I also simply, like, every time I walk around or I see the flag, I gotta stop. You know what I mean? Or if I see somebody wearing the colors, I know that, okay, this person is with me. So it's a huge symbol for me. It means nationhood, it means camaraderie. It means like, this is my sister, this is my brother right there, or this is somebody with who I'm fighting for the same cause, somebody who's aligned with me. So nationhood, brotherhood, camaraderie, liberation. That's kind of what this flag represents for me.
Sister Tata.
Yeah, bro, it means victory to me. is representative of the glorious ancestral power of our spirited blood, all African people, our rich motherland, and true symbolism of African perseverance and resistance on the path to liberation.
Who else? Brother Achille?
I can't really add too much to what everybody's already said. It really just stands for liberation, sovereignty, and it's the universal colors of all Black people globally. Pretty simple.
I don't know, family. I would say for me, this flag just represents hope. It represents discovery. I want when young people when they come across this flag, this red, black, and green, for them to discover that they are a part of a global African people, and I want for it to expand their worldview that they are not, yes, baby. You made ice cream? Okay, all right. She's trying to hand me her fake ice cream. So she cut me off midstream, but the red, black, and green to me, man, it just means our future. It just means our hope. So I appreciate I appreciate everybody. Ice cream? Okay. All right, family. I appreciate everybody joining us today. Brother Shanudi, I'm going to mute here and I'm going to let you close us out in prayer, brother.
All right. Well, no problem. Thank you again. So it's always good to thank the ancestors for this wonderful meeting, and whenever we get the chance to have a wonderful discussion as such. So I'm going to ask the ancestor to continue to bless us, to continue to protect our family, to protect our friend, and to continue to provide us abundance of opportunity to keep us healthy, courageous because we need it, and also committed to the liberation of our people. I ask the ancestor to continue to support our organization, Afrocentricity International, and any other organization worldwide fighting alongside with us. Unity is our aim, victory is our destiny. Ashe?
Ashe.
Ashe.
I've done my work. Well, I'll be live on Facebook and Instagram later, talking about the cycle of time in relation to spirituality. So anything, I don't have anything, rbgcentennial.com, go get your tickets. Anything else? Yeah.
Get your tickets